All right, get ready, because we're diving deep today into the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, specifically Chapter 72, which all about acupuncture.
It's amazing how relevant this ancient text still feels. You know, you might think acupuncture, oh, that's pretty mainstream now. But the insights in this chapter, they go way beyond just the basics.
Yeah, they really do. It's like they had this system for understanding energy flow and balance in the body. And we're just like now starting to catch up with it.
I know, it's true. And the way they frame it as a conversation between the Yellow Emperor and Chibo, his physician, makes it feel so immediate. You know, like you're right there listening in on this ancient wisdom.
And eavesdropping on a masterclass. So what jumps out at you from this chapter? What are some of the things that our listeners should know?
Well, one of the things that really struck me is how they emphasize the precision of acupuncture. It's not just sticking needles in random spots. Chibo talks about very specific points to target, based on which of the 5 elements is out of whack. Wood, fire, earth, metal, water.
It's funny because we hear about the 5 elements in a very general sense a lot.
Yeah.
But here they're using it as a diagnostic tool, like to pinpoint exactly where the energy's getting stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And they even go deeper, talking about how each element corresponds to different organs and functions in the body. For example, they say, if wood wants to ascend but is suppressed, it could indicate an imbalance in the liver meridian.
So unpack that a little for our listener. In traditional Chinese medicine, the liver is associated with the smooth flow of Qi. Kind of like how a healthy liver allows for detoxification in Western medicine. So what they're saying is, if that liver energy is blocked, it can impact the entire system.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about physical symptoms either. They connect the liver to emotions like anger and frustration.
So if you're feeling irritable or easily angered, it could be a sign that your liver kill is stagnant. I think a lot of people can relate to that. We've all been there.
Right. And what's interesting is they don't just focus on addressing these imbalances through needling. They also talk about lifestyle changes like diet and exercise. That can help to support the smooth flow of liver Qi.
It's about taking a holistic approach, looking at the whole person, understanding how all these different aspects are interconnected. Physical, emotional, even spiritual.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key takeaway from this chapter, the importance of treating both excess and deficiency in the body.
It's like that Goldilocks principle, right? Not too much, not too little, but just the right amount.
Exactly. And they have very different approaches for addressing each type of imbalance. So for excess, they talk about suppressing the depression and extracting from the transformative force. Now, that might sound a little cryptic, but essentially it means dispersing that excess energy that's causing stagnation.
So if you think of energy like a river, they're talking about removing the dam that's causing the water to back up.
That's a great analogy. And for deficiency, they talk about supporting the movement Qi, which means tonifying the areas where energy is lacking. It's like giving that river a little extra push to keep it flowing smoothly.
I love this idea of finding balance. It's so central to traditional Chinese medicine. It's not just about eliminating symptoms, but it's about restoring harmony to the whole system. And they don't stop there. They talk about how celestial cycles can influence our health. This is where it gets really interesting.
It is fascinating. They believed that these celestial movements, like the positions of the stars and planets, could impact the flow of energy in the human body. It's like we're all part of this grand cosmic dance.
I'm picturing like those old diagrams, the swirling lines and constellations. It's a beautiful image, this idea that we're not just separate individuals, but part of something much larger.
Exactly. And they use this understanding of celestial cycles to predict potential imbalances and to offer guidance on how to address them. For example, they talk about how the failure of the greater yang to shift correctly can lead to stagnation in the Tuyan meridian.
Hold on, let's break that down a little bit. For our listener who might not be familiar with these meridians, the greater yang refers to a specific energy pathway in the body. And when it doesn't shift smoothly, it can impact another pathway called the shuan, which runs along the inner leg.
You got it.
Yeah.
And in those cases, the text suggests treating specific points along the foot shuan pathway to restore balance. It's like they're saying, hey, we can anticipate these shifts in energy based on the celestial calendar and prepare for them.
It's a very proactive approach to healthcare. Instead of just waiting for something to go wrong, they're looking at the bigger picture and trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it is. And this idea of being proactive also comes up when they talk about protecting oneself from epidemics. This is where the text starts to feel almost mystical. You know, they talk about visualizing colored core emanating from the organs, forming this protective shield around the body.
It's interesting because even though that might sound far-fetched to some people, there's growing research on the power of the mind-body connection and how our thoughts and beliefs can actually influence our physical health.
Absolutely. And while we might not understand exactly how it works, I think there's something to be said for the intentionality of these practices. They were actively engaging with their energy and using visualization to strengthen their defenses.
It's like they were tapping into their inner pharmacy, harnessing the body's innate healing abilities. And they had other techniques too, right? Like that whole spitting out bad energy thing.
Right. They believed that the spring equinox was a time of renewal and purification, and that by spitting out bad energy, they were symbolically releasing anything that was holding them back, making them vulnerable to disease.
Like a ritualistic cleanse.
Yeah.
I kind of love that image. And they even have a recipe for a small gold pill using cinnabar male yellow and other ingredients that they believed could help protect against epidemics.
It's certainly a different approach than what we're used to in modern medicine.
No kidding. But you know what strikes me about all these techniques, whether it's visualization, spitting, or concocting pills, is that they're all about taking an active role in our health.
That's a great point. They weren't just passively waiting for illness to strike. They were actively engaging with their energy, their environment, and their own inner wisdom to stay healthy and resilient.
And it's not just about physical health either. They also talk about the importance of nourishing the spirit.
Right.
This is where the Yellow Emperor's Classic really goes beyond just a medical text. It starts to delve into philosophy and spirituality. They talk about how each organ houses a specific aspect of the spirit, and imbalances in those organs can manifest as emotional, mental, or spiritual distress.
It's like they had this whole map of the human psyche, connecting our inner landscape to our physical bodies.
And they believe that acupuncture could be used to address these imbalances and restore harmony to the spirit.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we're not just physical beings. We have an energetic and spiritual dimension that needs to be nurtured as well.
So we've got these different layers of balance. Balance within the body, balance with the cosmos, and balance within our own spirit. It's a lot to take in, but it's also incredibly inspiring.
It is. And it makes you wonder, if they were already thinking about these things thousands of years ago, what can we learn from them today? How can we apply this ancient wisdom to our modern lives?
Yeah.
And cultivate a deeper sense of well-being?
That's a great question, and one that I think we'll be exploring further as we delve deeper into this chapter.
I agree. There's so much more to unpack here. I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine. We've been unpacking Chapter 72, which offers this incredibly rich understanding of how acupuncture can be used to address not just physical ailments, but also imbalances in our energy and spirit.
It's mind-blowing how they saw the human being as this interconnected web, right, of energy, emotions, and even celestial influences. It's not just about treating the symptom, but understanding the root cause on this much deeper level. Exactly. And last time, we were starting to get into how they viewed the spirit as being intricately connected to our physical health.
Right, and they mapped this out so specifically. They believed that each of the major organs housed a different aspect of the spirit, and that imbalances in those organs could lead to a whole range of issues, from physical symptoms to emotional distress. It's like they were saying, hey, if you're feeling anxious or having trouble sleeping, it might not just be in your head. It could be an imbalance in your heart energy.
Precisely. It wasn't just about physical symptoms. They were looking at the emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions as well. And they had these very specific techniques for using acupuncture to address those imbalances.
So give us some specifics. Let's say someone is experiencing a lot of anger or frustration. How might they approach that from this perspective?
Well, in Chinese medicine, the liver is associated with the smooth flow of qi and emotions. So if someone was experiencing a lot of anger, they might diagnose it as liver qi stagnation. They might say the liver energy is getting stuck, like a dam in a river, causing a buildup of pressure and frustration.
Okay, so not just anger in general, but that feels pent up, almost like it's bubbling over. And how would they use acupuncture to address that?
Well, instead of just trying to suppress the anger, they would focus on releasing that pent-up energy and restoring balance. They might use specific acupuncture points along the liver meridian to help that energy flow more smoothly, like removing the dam and allowing the river to flow freely again.
It's so interesting how they saw emotions as energy, not just something happening in our minds, but the text also gets into the heart, right? What were some of the spiritual imbalances they associated with the heart?
Well, the heart houses the Shen, which is often translated as spirit or mind. And when I say mind, we're not just talking about the intellect, but also our emotional and spiritual center.
So the heart is kind of like the emperor of the organs,
Mm-hmm.
the seat of our consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and our connection to the world around us.
Exactly. And imbalances in the heart could manifest as anxiety, insomnia, or even a sense of disconnection from oneself and others. Like if someone was feeling really scattered or ungrounded, constantly worrying or unable to find peace, they might diagnose it as a heart imbalance.
And this really makes me think about how we approach mental health today. We tend to focus on medication or therapy, but maybe we could learn something from this ancient approach of balancing the energy of the organs. What would they do for a heart imbalance, for example?
Well, they might use acupuncture points to calm the Shen and promote a sense of inner peace. They might also recommend practices like meditation, qigong, or even certain herbs that nourish the heart and calm the mind.
It's fascinating how they saw the physical, the mental, and the spiritual as being so intertwined. You can't treat one without addressing the others.
That's right. And this interconnectedness brings us to the spleen. In Chinese medicine, the spleen is associated with digestion. But not just of food, it's also about our capacity to digest experiences, to process information and emotions. The spleen is said to house the yi, which represents the intellect, and the ability to think clearly.
So if someone was constantly overthinking,
Right.
worrying, or feeling mentally foggy, that might indicate a spleen imbalance.
It could. They might say the spleen qi is weak or deficient, leading to a kind of mental stagnation. Instead of just reaching for another cup of coffee, they might try acupuncture to strengthen the spleen qi and restore clarity and focus.
I love that. It's a more holistic approach to addressing those mental challenges.
Yeah.
And I know the lungs and kidneys also each have their own spirit associated with them, right?
Absolutely. The lungs were associated with the po, which is often translated as corporeal soul or animal spirit. The po is connected to our physical body, our breath, our senses, and our ability to be fully present in the world.
So if someone was feeling really disconnected from their body, from the simple joys of life, or had difficulty experiencing pleasure, that might suggest a lung imbalance.
It could. They might also experience grief, sadness, or a lack of vitality, almost like their life force was dimmed.
It's interesting to think about how grief can show up physically, not just as an emotion, but as a lack of energy, a difficulty breathing deeply, a sense of heaviness in the chest.
Exactly. And that brings us to the kidneys. The kidneys are seen as the root of our vital energy, our reserves of strength and resilience. They house the Z, which is associated with willpower, determination, and our ability to overcome challenges.
So if someone was feeling really depleted or lacking in motivation, that could be a sign of kidney imbalance, like they've just run out of steam.
Right. They might also experience fear, anxiety,
Right.
or a lack of confidence. It's like that feeling of having your inner pilot light go out.
Wow, so they really did have this whole system for understanding and treating the different facets of the human spirit. And it's not just about treating these imbalances right. They also talk about how to cultivate and nourish the spirit.
That's a crucial part of it. They weren't just focused on fixing what was broken, but also on actively cultivating a state of well-being. They believed that by nurturing our spirit, we could strengthen our resilience, enhance our creativity, and live more fulfilling lives.
Okay, I have to ask, how did they view the spirit itself? What did they actually believe it was?
That's a question. The philosophers and scholars have debated for centuries, and there's no one simple answer. But in the context of Chinese medicine, the spirit is often seen as an energetic essence that animates and informs our physical body. It's what gives us life, consciousness, and individuality.
So it's not necessarily something separate from the body, like a soul that exists independently, but rather an energy that permeates our entire being.
More like they're intertwined. They saw the spirit as being intimately connected to our physical form, our emotions, and our mental processes. And they believed that by understanding and nourishing the spirit, we could achieve a higher level of health and well-being.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It aligns with what we've been talking about, this holistic view of the human being as a complex system of interconnected energies and experiences.
Exactly. And they didn't just leave it at that. They also offered practical ways to nurture the spirit, practices like meditation, qigong, and living in harmony with nature. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about actively cultivating a state of well-being.
So much of this resonates with me. We're so focused on our physical health, our careers, and our material possessions in the modern world that we often forget to nurture our inner selves. It's like we're constantly running on empty And then we wonder why we feel burned out and depleted.
It's so true. And the Yellow Emperor's Classic reminds us that well-being isn't just about the absence of disease, but about cultivating vitality, resilience, and a deep connection to ourselves and the world around us.
So we've talked a lot about the theoretical side of things, but let's get practical for a moment. How can we actually apply some of these principles in our own lives?
That's a great question. And I think there are a few key takeaways from this chapter that we can all benefit from. First, it's important to remember that our emotions and our thoughts have a direct impact on our physical health. When we experience stress, anxiety, or anger, it can disrupt the flow of qi and create imbalances in the body.
So it's not just about what we eat or how much we exercise. Our mental and emotional state plays a huge role in our overall well-being. This is something that modern science is starting to understand more deeply as well, right? The mind-body connection is real.
Absolutely. And that's why practices like meditation, mindfulness, and stress reduction are so important. They can help us to cultivate a more balanced and harmonious internal environment.
That's one takeaway. What else?
Another important lesson is that we need to pay attention to our energy levels. If we're constantly feeling depleted or exhausted, it could be a sign of an underlying imbalance. And it might not just be physical exhaustion, it could be mental or emotional exhaustion as well.
So it's about tuning into our bodies.
Yeah.
Noticing how we're feeling on all levels, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And if we're feeling constantly drained, it might be a sign that something's out of whack. And what can we do about that?
Well, traditional Chinese medicine offers a variety of tools for addressing energy imbalances, including acupuncture, herbal medicine, and lifestyle changes. But it could also be as simple as taking a break, getting some fresh air, or spending time doing something that brings you joy. It's about listening to your body and giving it what it needs.
So it might be worth exploring some of those options if we're feeling chronically run down. What else?
Finally, and this is a big one, I think it's crucial to remember that true well-being involves nourishing our spirit. This means taking time for activities that bring us joy, connecting with nature, and cultivating a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. It's about taking care of ourselves on a deeper level.
That's a beautiful message. It's about recognizing that we're more than just physical beings. We have an energetic and spiritual dimension that needs to be nurtured as well.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we're part of something larger than ourselves, and that our lives have meaning and purpose beyond just the day-to-day grind.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm really starting to see how this ancient wisdom can be applied to our modern lives. But we haven't even gotten to the part about epidemics. The text mentions specific techniques for protecting oneself from epidemics. And I'm curious, could those be relevant today, even though we have modern medicine?
That's a fascinating question, and one that deserves its own deep dive. In the next part of our exploration, we'll delve into those ancient practices and see what insights they might offer for staying healthy and resilient in today's world. Because even with all the advancements we've made in medicine, there's always more to learn from the wisdom of the past.
Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey through the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, exploring this ancient approach to health and well-being, and how they used acupuncture to address imbalances, not just in the physical body, but also in our energy and spirit.
It is striking how, even though this was written thousands of years ago, so much of it feels relevant to the challenges we face today.
Absolutely. Like last time we were talking about how they approached epidemics. And I have to admit, I'm really curious to dive into that.
I know, right? It's like stepping back in time to a world without antibiotics and antiviral medications, and yet they had all these fascinating methods for protecting themselves.
Exactly. So let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What were some of the methods that stood out to you?
Well, one that really caught my attention was this visualization technique, where they imagined different colored krees emanating from their hands, forming this kind of protective shield around the body.
It's like an energy force field. I mean, is that something they actually believed would work? Or was it more symbolic?
That's a great question. And while we can't know for sure what was going on in their minds, traditional Chinese medicine places a lot of emphasis on the power of the mind and intention influenced our health. They believed that our thoughts and emotions have a very direct impact on our energy flow, which in turn influences our physical well-being.
So it wasn't just wishful thinking. They were actually trying to harness the power of their minds to strengthen their defenses.
Exactly. And, in a way, it's not that different from how we talk about the placebo effect today. We know that our beliefs and expectations can have a very real impact on our experience of illness and healing.
That's so true. So in a sense, they were tapping into that mind-body connection to create a kind of energetic immunity
Exactly. And they didn't just stop there. They also had these more physical practices, like spitting out bad energy. On the spring equinox...
I actually did that.
Yeah.
Like, just hawked a loogie and called it good.
It sounds a little strange to us, but they believed that the spring equinox was a time of renewal and purification, kind of like hitting the reset button on the year. And by spitting out bad energy, they were symbolically releasing anything that was holding them back or making them vulnerable to disease.
Interesting. So it was less about the physical act of spitting and more about the intention behind it, this idea of letting go of what no longer serves you.
Exactly. They were using ritual and symbolism to try and shift their energy and align themselves with the natural rhythms of the year. And speaking of natural rhythms, they also recommended taking medicinal baths after rainwater, which is another time of year, associated with cleansing and renewal.
So it's interesting how they were really attuned to nature and believed that by working with those natural cycles, they could optimize their health.
Absolutely. And they took it even further with things like that small gold pill recipe we talked about earlier, which used ingredients like cinnabar, male yellow, and purple gold. It's definitely a different approach than what we're used to in modern medicine.
Yeah, that one sounds a little too out there for me. I think I'll stick to my vitamin C. But it is fascinating to see how they were experimenting with different substances and approaches to try to boost their immunity.
It is. And while we might not be spitting out bad energy or whipping up ancient potions these days, I think there are some really valuable takeaways from these practices that we can apply to our lives today.
Like what? Give us some practical tips that our listener can walk away with.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's about cultivating a mindset of awareness and intention when it comes to our health. It's not just about passively waiting for something to go wrong, but about actively engaging with our bodies and our environment to stay healthy and resilient.
So being proactive rather than reactive.
Exactly. And part of that is paying attention to our thoughts and emotions and how they're impacting our well-being. We know that stress, anxiety, and negative emotions can weaken our immune systems. So finding ways to manage those is really crucial.
So practices like meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature, those are all things that can help us build resilience, not just mentally and emotionally, but also physically.
Exactly. And the other big takeaway for me is this idea of connecting with nature. The ancient Chinese were so deeply attuned to the natural world and believed that by aligning ourselves with its rhythms, we could optimize our health.
It makes sense, right? We are part of nature, not separate from it. So getting out into the fresh air, exposing ourselves to sunlight, connecting with the natural world can help us get back into that balance.
Absolutely. And even if we don't fully understand the mechanisms behind it, there's something inherently grounding and restorative about being in nature.
This has been such a fascinating journey through the Yellow Emperor's Classic. We've covered so much ground, from the nuances of acupuncture and energy flow to the spiritual dimensions of health, and even these ancient approaches to immunity. It really makes you think. But how much we can still learn from these ancient traditions.
It really does. And it's a reminder that true well-being is about so much more than just the absence of disease. It's about cultivating balance, harmony, and connection on all levels. Physical, emotional, spiritual, and even energetic.
Well said. Yeah. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of this as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep cultivating your own well-being.